And this is Africa News Network, First Fast Live. My name is Cindy Mabi. Thanks indeed for joining ANN7 Prime. You're most welcome to engage with us on social media. But first, these are the leading stories we're following up this evening. Now, many South Africans are fearful over levels of crime in the country. The Victims of Crime Survey 2015-16 reveals this perception despite a decrease in the number of incidents. Releasing the survey, Statistical General Dr. Padi Lehohla says the public faith in the police or the police's ability to curb crime has dropped. Satisfaction with the courts also dropped since 2011. The report shows that guns are the most commonly used weapons, and most households cite drugs as the reason for crime in their communities. The overall number of incidents dropped to 807,000. However, many crimes still go unreported, and household satisfaction with the courts dropped to 10.5% since 2011. Housebreaking or burglaries decreased by 1.1% since 2011, and the Western Cape has the lowest satisfaction with the courts at 32.2%. And some 66% of those in the Northern Cape believe that the courts are too lenient, and at least 70% of respondents don't feel safe at night.
So naturally, the numbers are likely to differ. Ideally, they must be the same. And it's important to record every crime because it helps tactically and strategically to deal with it. So we can see that from the victims of crime, a number of people have actually experienced home robbery here from the victim side, and very few of those are reported as SARS. Can police do something about drugs? The question was, why are you not reporting? And the public say the police cannot do anything about it. And that's, I think, a very serious indictment that people have lost hope that the police can do something about things. But we must also remember that the absolute number of crimes has actually declined. Is it because police were there to deter it? Possibly. But we also know that police visibility in the minds of people has also declined.
A massive 70% of people feel unsafe in South Africa, and nearly 42% of people believe crime has increased despite the number of incidents declining. Guns are seen as the most commonly used weapons, while housebreaking and burglary is perceived as the most common crime in the country, and the murder of at least, or rather, this is also common. Now, white-headed households are more fearful of going to open spaces and parks than black-headed households, and the gap is even bigger when it comes to allowing kids to play in the community unsupervised. And joining us live in studio is Advocate John Walsh, the chairman for the South Africa Gun Owners Association. On the line, Adele Kirsten is with Gun Free South Africa, and Dr. Padi Lehohla joins us via Skype. He's the Statistician General. And thanks to all our guests for joining us. We'll open the lines for you, and you can share your stories on 011-542-2186 if you yourself have been a victim of crime, and whether the fear is perceived or real that you don't allow your children in open spaces. Share your experiences with us. We'll start with Advocate Walsh. You're advocating for a gun-free, or rather, for guns in South Africa, and yet we see with the victim survey that most, or rather, guns are commonly used in contact crimes. Why then do you still advocate for guns or gun ownership?
Let me first clarify the issue. We do not advocate for a free society possessing firearms. What we do say is that free and responsible citizens who have qualified should own guns if they decide to do that. So in other words, what we do say is that the firearm in itself is merely a tool, like any other piece of equipment or weapon, a knife, fire, whatever the case may be, that constitutes the tool within the evil mind. So in other words, when we have a person who has an evil mind, who is prone to commit crimes, and he will prey on his victims. He would use whatever he can. And the most important aspect why we are so much in favor of the right of free and responsible people to own firearms is specifically because a firearm, especially a handgun, is the best piece of equipment that such a person can possess to defend himself against these unlawful and violent attacks.
Yeah, I want to go to the perception that 70% of people, this is not actual factual figures. We've seen that crime statistics have declined. It may be little consolation for those who had been directly affected by crime, but by saying that responsible ownership of firearms is permissible, it also feeds into the very fear that is perceived, that you anticipate that you're going to be either hijacked or there'll be a robbery, as opposed to dealing with the issue of crime, if you get what I mean.
I fully understand what you mean. And I fully agree that one should never feed into the perception, but one must remember it's not only a perception, it's a reality that we are living within a crime-ridden society, and a violent crime-ridden society that be it. So in other words, what we are saying, although these surveys are based to a large extent on perceptions by people, we do know that crime is rife, and especially violent crime. Recently I've just checked, just on farm attacks, for instance, since the beginning of this year, in other words, for 1.5 months, there had been 44 farm attacks in 1.5 months, during which 10 people were killed and quite a large number seriously injured. In many of those instances, the perpetrators have not been arrested, and one does not know what's going to happen. So the fact of the matter is, if you take into account, madam, that the reaction time of the police on average is approximately 20 minutes after having received a distress call, 20 minutes, what can happen during that particular period? For that reason, what we are saying, we are not feeding, and gun owners do not feed into this particular perception. They protect, and they do have the right to protect themselves against these violent attacks.
All right, let's join, or rather invite Dr. Padi Lehohla, Statistician General. Dr. Lehohla, thanks so much for joining us. We do have Advocate John Welsh, Chairman of South Africa Gun Owners Association. And the question I pose is that do we not feed into the perception that indeed South Africa is the most violent, or rather violent country in the world, and that you need to arm yourself because, things happen randomly or haphazardly or sporadically, that you're not able to defend yourself? What is your view, sir?
We don't have opinions around what the map would be. What we have is a measurement of a factual measurement of what the levels of crime are, and we anchor that in the NDP desire that South Africans feel and are indeed safe. And the medium-term strategic framework of South Africa in relation to mental crime is important.
Dr. Lehohla, your line is terrible. I'm just going to ask our producers to please get you back. And we'll also be joined by Adele Kirsten, Gun Free South Africa. Adele, thanks so much for your time. Your reaction to the Victims of Crime survey, saying that 70% of South Africans feel unsafe. And primarily, if you break it down in racial groups, that white people compared to black respondents feel that the public spaces in themselves are also threatened. What is your response?
Good evening, Cindy, and thanks for having us on the show. I think perceptions are important because they influence people's behavior and actions. And I think the example of 70% of people feeling unsafe is an example of that. Because we know that the majority of people who are victims of crime would be poor black people. And I think one of the things you begin to see is the logical response or the knee-jerk response is that I don't feel safe and let me get a gun because it's a powerful weapon. It does have the ability to shoot and kill. But there's absolutely no evidence to show that particularly a gun in the home will protect you from attack. In fact, the evidence shows elsewhere that it's a risk for intimate partner femicide. And today is Valentine's Day. We know that women in particular are vulnerable in their home, especially from their partner with a legal gun. There's the risk of suicide. There's a risk of accidental injury. And of course, given the high levels of crime, there's a huge risk of loss and theft from the home. So the logic is that guns are not a good means of self-defense.
Adele, just stay on the line for me. I'm sorry. We're taking a caller. Please stay on the line. We have I almost said a witness. That's his name. A caller from Pretoria. Hello, witness.
Hi, how
Good
are
evening.
you?
I'm good, thank you. Is that your name, witness?
Yes.
All right, so what's your question or comment?
Yes, my comment is almost we can say everybody is not safe in South Africa because there's a lot of crime. You can't even trust the policemen. You can't trust anyone. Even if you go in the street, the policemen just search you for no reason. They even search the elderly people. They mishandle us. You know, it's not safe in South Africa. There are a lot of drugs in the street. The policemen don't do anything about all those things.
All right, witness, thanks so much for your call. We have Dr. Lehotla back online. He's the Statistician General. Thanks so much, Dr. Lehotla. Just a question on the trust deficit and why people don't report crimes. I just want to reflect back on the police crime statistics showing a decline in contact crimes versus the perception of South Africa being more violent and people feeling fearful. What is the middle ground here? Which is a fact and a fiction?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the levels of crime have declined. But you look at 931,000 incidents to 807,000 incidents over a 5-year or 6-year period. Well, that's about a 70,000 drop, which gives you about 10,000 drop per year. And that's a drop from a very high level. So there has to be a threshold within which the perception has to change. That threshold, I do not know what it could be, but 900,000 to 807,000 attacked with a gun or a knife, that in itself terrifies. So even if there is a decline, there is always a confidence lag. The confidence will always lag behind, and you can only be confident when the numbers start changing significantly. This is not a significant drop.
Stay on the line,
Yes.
Dr. Lehotla. Just Advocate Walsh, your response to Gun Free SA, Adele, saying there isn't scientific evidence that proves that the ownership of a firearm, albeit legitimately, reduces crime necessarily. There's a higher risk of suicide or accidental death or even femicide.
That is quite possible that any of those incidents may happen. The fact of the matter is they have happened long before the advent of firearms. People have been killing one another in the exactly the same reason why we say firearms cannot be banned, because they belong in the hands of people, law-abiding people, as a first response to violent crime. If you only restrict military and law enforcement, and you only trust them with firearms, we are on the slide down towards a police state. And I don't want that to happen.
All right, let's get a caller, Joa in Durban. Thanks so much for your patience. Good evening to you and welcome to ANN7 Prime. What's your question or comment? All right, we lost Joa there. Adele, I'm not sure if you're still on the line. We seem to be having problems with the audio, which our technicians are working on. Let's just deal with the element of fear. And this, as Advocate Walsh rightfully says, has to do with interpersonal relations that we have. I mean, the crimes that are also reported indicate that 80% of those are with people that are known to us. So there's a level of intimacy when these crimes happen, absent, of course, of housebreaking. But some could even argue that these could be potential opportunistic crimes, where in your community, if you leave your windows open or in a complex, having a safe community in itself is a fallacy, because human beings can betray one another. So Adele, in that context, should we not rather work on the trust deficit as opposed to advocating for being armed or, for having more guns? Adele? Advocate Walsh, maybe you can respond to that while our technicians work on the audio problem.
I think the question that you have asked, I think, is a very important one. I certainly believe that from both sides, whether we look at a pro-firearm or an anti-firearm perspective, the question remains at the end of the day, what is being done by the people, by government, to promote civil disobedience or to abide by the law. Just driving here tonight, the 20 kilometers that I had to drive, if I must tell you the number of infractions of the law that have taken place, it would be unbelievable. Why do people do that? Because they do not abide by the law. There is apparently some or other understanding that I don't have to abide by the law. I don't have to stop at a stop sign. I don't have to stop at a red traffic light. And that, unfortunately, is where it starts. And I want people to go back, and whether we are pro or anti, I want people to go back, and I want government to go back towards this notion of creating people who abide by the law. And I think once we have achieved that, then we can start talking about more intricate issues, such as whether a person should own a firearm or whether he should not own a firearm.
All right, I believe we have Adele back. Thanks. Third time lucky, we hope, Adele. Is it your perception, or perhaps can we prove that crime has indeed increased since the dispensation, or the democratic dispensation at that?
Well, I think it's important to remember that prior to 1994, we didn't have accurate stats. We had Bantustans, we had homelands, etc. So really 94 is our first baseline. So it's important to remember that. And then you see what happens in many countries, in Latin America, even a country like Russia, where you're going through a rapid kind of political and social and economic transformation and transition, you do see an increase in crime. And we saw that in South Africa in the late 90s. 98, 99 is when our murder rate peaked. I think we had close on 26,000 murders. I mean, that's come down to 18,000 last year. And that is, over the last 4 years, we've seen a steady increase in the murder rate. So we definitely seen a reduction over a 25-year period. But over the last 4 years, we're seeing a steady increase in violent crimes: murder, attempted murder, assault, GBH, or robbery with aggravating circumstances. And that's worrying. And things like house robberies, those are the crimes that feed perceptions that make people feel unsafe. So there is much more that SAPS can be doing. For Gun-Free South Africa, we know that we've seen an almost 50% reduction in gun deaths over the last 20 years. But we're noticing an increase in the last year or two, and that worries us.
Adele, we'll talk about what contributors lead to the increase in crime, as you were saying, particularly when it comes to gun violence. So we do have a caller, though. Joa in Durban, you're back with us. Good evening.
South of Durban.
Yes, welcome.
Good evening to you.
We're listening.
Yeah, all right. It's just a few years ago, my son and my grandson were hijacked outside our gate here. And I'll tell you something, everybody is so paranoid in this house. They've got razor wire, they've got alarms, they've got cameras, and it's not a way to live.
No,
I don't
certainly,
have to put out in the garden anymore.
Yeah, but let's just talk in terms of your case. Were you satisfied with the way it was handled, the process with collecting evidence and up to prosecution?
Well, I don't know, we reported to the police, but it doesn't come to anything. They can't find all these people. And you can't expect them to either.
Yeah,
I don't think there's enough police force. They should actually employ more people.
Yeah, but what I'm testing here is the trust that you have in the police, or at least in the institutions that are there. That did you even feel the need to report the crime itself, or did you just let it go in the sense that nothing will be done about it?
Look, both really. You can't expect the police to go out and put their lives on the line if there has been there was a little bit of violence, but nobody was injured. And I don't expect them to do it.
Yeah, thank God for that. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah. Dr. Lehotla, just the contributors to this, the communities have cited drug substance abuse and just lawlessness and a society that, of impunity, as it were, that people are not, there are no consequences for these crimes. Are these some of the reasons why we see a spike in the perception that a crime has increased?
Well, I'm not sure what causes the perception that crime has increased, but as I pointed out, you need a threshold within which perceptions are shaped around decline in crime. Indeed, in absolute numbers, we can see the numbers dropping as well as in percentage terms. The drop passing sessions on whether there is a dropout is too small to keep the scales of perceptions. But public perceptions are very important, including in relation to what are the drivers of this crime. For instance, they see 70% of the time, 77% of the time, drugs being the driver of crime. That's the one thing. And then, of course, poverty and, of course, greed as one of those. And when you take those together and start aligning policy towards those, then you may start addressing the real drivers of crime, including the fact that people who are in assaults or rape, in the majority of cases, are people who know one another. And therefore, there has to be it's a crime that cannot be policed by the police. It's a social problem. And to try and impose on the police to do something about that on their own, it's actually asking for no solution. So the data at our disposal gives us a carpet, so to say, of issues that have to be looked into as we tackle crime.
All right, Dr. Lehotla, we're going to have to let you go. Thank you so much. Khumalo in Free State, thanks for calling. Good evening to you.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
I'm fine, Cindy. Cindy, you know what, people every day are complaining about the police being corrupt, the police they're calling the police names and whatsoever. But now my question is that, here in South Africa, actually police, they actually lose interest because of if they are doing their job, people actually know the law too much. So now they are actually taking that as an advantage, you see. Because now, my question is that I just want to understand only one thing, that if we want our police to work, we must just try to find out what actually makes the police to be corrupt. Like an example, the new students that are coming, maybe from 2007 up until now, if you can ask him or her, did you ever went to court to testify, or did you ever arrest somebody for a certain crime? They'll tell you that there is nothing, they didn't have done that up until so far, because now they're afraid. If they reach court, then what is happening there in court, they're being exposed.
Yeah, Kumalo, I'm afraid we have to take a break. I really appreciate your call. It's a debate that we'll continue having on the show or on the channel, but you're most welcome to continue on social media. Advocate Walsh, thanks indeed for your time. That's Advocate John Walsh, SA Gun Owners Association, a chairperson rather, and Adele Kirsten is a gun-free, or with Gun-Free SA. Dr. Badile Hodla, Statistician General, thanks indeed for your calls. We're back after this.